There was a boy, and he was going to school with his best friend. And this boy was actually the crown prince, and one day he was going to take over the kingdom from his father. So this boy turned to his friend and said, "I know that you really like studying history, and maybe I could use your help. If you can please research everything that's happened in human history so far, and then give it to me, maybe it'll make me a better king." And so his friend said, "Okay, I'll try my best." And they went their separate ways. 10 years go by, and this boy has now become the king of the city. And his friend comes and he says, "So when we were younger, you told me to put together the history of everything that's happened so far with humans. And I think I've done it." And the king says, "Okay, let me see it." And so he brings 30 books with him. He says, "This is everything that has happened in the history of humans so far." And the king looked at it and he said, "I just became the king. I have so much work to do. I don't have time to read all of this. Go and condense it and then bring it back to me." So the man said, "Okay," and he went, and another 10 years goes by. So after 10 years, the man comes and he says, "King, I've done what you've asked. I've condensed the entire human history." The king says, "Okay, how many books?" And he said 10. And the king says, "Well, now I've just gotten married. I have children. I have to take care of them. I don't have time to go through 10 books. So condense it further and then bring it back to me." So man said, "Okay." And so he goes, another 15 years goes by, and he comes back, and at this time the king is in the middle of a battlefield. He's about to wage war on his enemies. And this man comes. He says, King, I've done it, I've condensed it." And the king said, "Okay, where is it?" He said, "It's right here." He said, "How many volumes?" He said, "It's one book." And the king said, No, I'm going to war. I don't have time to read a whole book. Condense it further and then bring it back to me." So the man said, "Okay." And another 20 years goes by. And at this time, the king is on his deathbed. And the man comes and says, "King, I've condensed the entire history of humans." And the king looks at him and he says, "I'm about to die. I only have a little bit of time. So just whisper into my ear one sentence that culminates the entire history of humans." So at this time, they're both very, very old. And this man leans over to the king and he says, "King, they suffer. They suffer, my king." He said, "This is the entire history of humans, is that they suffer." And the moment he said this, the king closes his eyes and he passes away. Suffering is something that we're constantly dealing with all of the time. And when we look at social media, when we look at the TV, when we look at magazines, they always tell us that the best way to overcome this suffering is to buy more of something, to get more of something. So it's, if I'm on Instagram, how many more likes can I get? If I'm on Facebook, how many more friends can I get? If I'm looking for something on the internet, how much more of something can I get? And so in this way, the world is a paradox, because it tells you, if you buy more of what I'm selling you, you will be more happy. But what's really interesting is that the more we do what the world tells us, the less happy we become. And so here that we see, actually in reality, the paradox is that sometimes the less we have of something, actually the more happier we will be. So if we sort of continue along the same way that most of us are going, of course suffering is something that's going to be inevitable. It's going to happen. But if as a community we change our perspective and we see that this is not about getting more likes, it's not about getting more things, avoiding suffering is actually changing our perspective of how we look at things. So rather than getting more, we give more. Rather than wanting more, we say, how can I help more? And just by changing this perspective on how we look at life, then for sure we can avoid suffering that inevitably everyone faces at one time or another.